Body of work. Intern. Every patient tells a story. Do no harm. At first glance, these phrases are concisely curious, surface-level comprehensive, yet hinting at something more. If you were not familiar with the phrases before, perhaps you gradually began to notice that these words, which in reality are book titles, were all somehow related to science and medicine. The book's respective subtitles are what enrich them with life. Here they are. Meditations on Mortality from the Human Anatomy Lab. A Doctor's Initiation. Medical Mysteries and the Art of Diagnosis. And last but not least, Stories of Life, Death, and Brain Surgery. As an aspiring physician, a mention of anything even remotely related to medicine or the science of the human body, such as these book titles, will most definitely pique my interest. Such as that one time I read that a film named The Autopsy of Jane Doe was categorized as a thriller and became immediately excited, thinking that it might involve a plot related to medicine or forensics. I mean, autopsy, medicine, right? Some sort of relation? Not quite. I realized while watching the movie that it was actually more of a supernatural horror thriller than a medical thriller. But my curiosity about content related to medicine, especially movies and books, has been with me for a very large part of my life. I vividly remember in middle school how I would spot those fascinating titles perched on the top of the recommended reads bookshelf at my local library. As I picked up the books and thumbed through the pages, I would glance at the jargon and anatomical terminology and think to myself, I can't wait for the day when I know what all of this will mean. I would check out the new books every 2 weeks and take them home with me to pick up as soon as possible after speedily finishing my homework for the night. I definitely was and still am a bookworm. I would be amazed by the stories these physicians recounted in their books. A world in which it seemed like physicians could perform medical miracles. Just the simple act of reading about the physicians caring and interacting with their patients and helping them continued to draw me into the dream of becoming a physician. At my core, I simply wanted to serve others in need, as many pre-medical students hope. Reading these books as a young student was a fascinating foray into the world of medicine that I did not necessarily have a means of peeking into otherwise, mainly due to restrictions because of my younger age and also due to not being a healthcare professional, of course. But while I began to gather my initial thoughts about the medical world while sitting in my chair at the dining table at 12 years old, it wasn't until much, much later that I realized the value of the reflections that the physicians had shared through those written book works. One of the ways in which that gradual shift in my own pre-med journey happened was through a narrative medicine workshop group hosted at my college. We would meet once a week, every week in person, on the spring Tuesday evenings for about 2 months. The meetings included around 10 of my fellow undergraduate peers and myself, and was led by 2 older students pursuing their master's degrees in narrative medicine. Narrative medicine, for context, is a highly interdisciplinary field that brings together the humanities and healthcare and explores the voices of patients and caregivers in unison. Every week, we would center our discussions on a work of art or text or music and think about the underlying meaning and the message of the piece as a whole. In doing so, we would focus on the dynamics of the physician-patient relationship and explore further what it means to have clinical empathy, being sure to center active listening and respectful acknowledgement in the heart of a clinical setting. This allowed us to better understand the role of the patient's life and medical story and how it comes together with the physician's odyssey. Coming out of these workshops on those slightly chilly Tuesday evenings left me with a sense of intellectual and emotional fulfillment. And I would often find myself continuing to recall and think again and again about themes we had discussed in those narrative medicine workshops, especially on early Friday mornings, which is when I would walk through the hallways of the Mount Sinai Morningside Hospital as a rounding volunteer. And I would ponder about how these everyday encounters I had with patients there and the glimpses of doctors and nurses checking in with their patients went just beyond the simple hello and goodbye, but rather was a substantial, long-lasting impact on all people involved in those dynamics of care. It made me think back to the years when I would volunteer at my community's senior care center and spend time getting to know the elderly residents there. One evening, I walked into the senior center and found out that one of the old elderly residents, who I had gotten to know well over the years, had unfortunately passed away that morning. And I didn't really know what to do at that time or how to even process the loss of the incident. It had occurred so suddenly, and it actually didn't hit me until a couple days later when I heard my elderly friend's favorite song come up on my music player. And it definitely wasn't until into college when I sat down with my narrative medicine discussion group and shared my experiences with my peers that I was able to truly mull about on it and think about it. Conversations about mortality don't tend to come up very often in the pre-med journey. It seems like something that is touched upon in medical school, but not directly addressed for pre-meds. I find that engaging in this kind of reflection, not just about mortality and loss of dear ones, but also the very applicable physician-patient interactions, these purposefully prepare future medical students for what is to come. And as I attend narrative medicine workshops and reread the books that I first picked up as a middle schooler, I can now see the power of reflection in stories and discussion and art, and that can truly empower pre-meds. In the process of applying to medical school, students are often recommended or required to engage in opportunities that take place in clinical settings, such as volunteering at a hospital or senior center, or even shadowing a doctor, to get more exposure to what exactly happens behind the scenes in medicine. One thing that I've noticed, though, is that there aren't many spaces or ways for pre-med students to gather and sit down and take time to truly think about their experiences through those different clinical opportunities and truly think about what they mean. The medical school process puts a great emphasis on checking the boxes on required coursework, such as the infamous organic chemistry that we all know, to prepare students content-wise for the rigorous amounts of knowledge that will be shared in medical school. But students are extremely preoccupied with completing their required coursework, however, and it is extremely difficult to chunk out time to simply sit and ponder with peers. Courses such as ethics, philosophy, and narrative medicine even are often not explicitly named as requirements. Some are suggested or recommended courses, but they can frame the pre-med discussion in essential ways for students to think about how these clinical incidents they have observed fit into the medical route. Reflection allows future doctors to look past the surface level, given book title, or an incident, and begin to think about the subtitles, the underlying reflections and meanings of an experience. That transition of going beyond simply observing and reading and digesting information from content-based courses to actively applying that and incorporating personal thoughts and engaging with peers and their narratives is at the heart of being pre-med. The actual dynamics of a medical world, the emotions and experiences at the heart of the physician-patient relationship, these speak a million words. And if we can place that intellectual and emotional reflection at the center of the pre-medical journey, today's students will definitely be the informed, prepared, and thoughtful clinicians of tomorrow. Thank you.